That's how one Red Guard described the final years of Emperor Palpatine, not in awe, but in terror. You may think you know what an aging Sith looks like, the pale face, the sunken eyes, but the truth is darker. It wasn't age that took Palpatine. It was the dark side itself, rotting him from the inside out. Quote, "Subject exhibits progressive necrosis around jawline, fingertips, and thoracic cavity. Odor classified as toxic. Droid medics recommend sealed atmospheric conditions for preservation of staff health. Request for surgical graft denied. Reason: the Emperor finds pain invigorating." End quote. Palpatine didn't sit on a throne. He leaked into it. The golden chair of the Imperial Palace, long believed to be symbolic, was actually fitted with fluid absorption pads. Twice a day, maintenance droids had to change the lining beneath his seat to remove bodily discharge. The Sith Lord was melting alive, and still he smiled. Behind those famous dark robes were not scars, but fungal colonies. The humidity in his private chambers was kept at exact, stable levels, not for comfort, but because his tissue reacted poorly to dry air. When his sleeves shifted, guards caught glimpses of discolored patches, bubbling and pulsing, the signs of something not dead, but no longer alive. Security footage, most of which was deleted, but fragments survived, show moments when he would pause during speeches, reach under his cloak, and scratch violently, shedding blackened tissue that droids would swiftly vacuum away. His fingers, once delicate and precise, they had become twisted claws, the nails warped like obsidian shards. Some claimed his fingertips had splintered open, revealing veins that hissed with power or infection. Each morning, before meetings with moths or dignitaries, the Emperor underwent a 30-minute chemical misting, applied by droids built specifically to mask his stench. Not eliminate, that was impossible. Just dull it enough that humans could survive in the same room. One defector from the Imperial Navy described his first audience. It smelled like a crypt, but wetter, like someone had buried a swamp in a coffin. The Emperor rarely spoke directly anymore. He communicated through intermediaries, hollows, or the voice-modulated system in his throne, designed not for effect, but because his real voice had degraded into a whispering wheeze that carried spores. Yes, spores. Biologists later discovered that trace amounts of microscopic particles in his breath were capable of infecting biological samples. It's still debated whether this was the result of Sith alchemy or just natural decomposition. You'd think a being in that much agony would seek comfort, but Palpatine did the opposite. He fed on it. Witnesses reported that in private meditation, he would reopen his own wounds, fingers digging into his own rotted stomach. He whispered to the gashes like they were portals to something else. He believed pain was the purest form of connection to the dark side, that decay was the ultimate form of power, not building, not fighting, but falling apart and never dying. One servant, later executed, left behind a scribbled journal page. "He sleeps, but not like us. His chest rises and falls, but I do not think he breathes. Sometimes he stops for hours, and I think it is over. But then he opens his eyes and he is smiling. By the last year of the Empire, Palpatine was no longer recognizable as human. He didn't age, he transformed. Into what? A symbol? A parasite? A god? No one knows. What's clear is this: he chose to live inside the horror, to become the physical embodiment of entropy. And through sheer will, he held his putrid body together, not with medicine, but with hatred. Rulers conquer, monsters delete. These words, found scrawled in blood on the walls of a collapsed communications station near the unknown regions, were long dismissed as the ramblings of a mad technician. But over time, their meaning became clearer. Palpatine didn't want to rule the galaxy. He wanted to unmake it, to turn stars into shadows, civilizations into static, memory into silence.
There are hundreds of star systems that once appeared on pre-Empire maps, bustling with life, art, and science. Now, they're gone. Not bombed, not glassed, gone. Removed from records, navicomputers, archives, and even the collective memory of the Republic. Entire planets like Segment 9, Norvalis, Chandar's Folly were erased not just from the galaxy, but from history. Rebels thought it was military cover-up, but whispers from within the ISB tell a more terrifying story. He didn't want them destroyed, he wanted them forgotten. He wanted the Force to stop remembering them. Palpatine created voids, black holes of memory, places the Force no longer touched, places where ghosts had nothing left to haunt. Imperial protocols labeled this operation as ShadowNet Red, a term found in only 3 surviving documents, all burned at the edges. The steps were always the same. Biological dismantling. A specialized battalion of scientists, droids, and Sith agents would descend on the target planet. Flora and fauna were not bombed. They were neutralized at the cellular level, using Sith alchemical toxins. Forests rotted upright. Animals dropped dead mid-step. Rivers turned clear, and then dry. The Force cried out, then went silent. Digital purge. All mentions of the system were deleted from central data cores across the Empire. HoloNet links were scrubbed. Star charts were redrawn. Even spoken recollections were punished. Talking about these places became a death sentence. Spiritual extraction. The final phase was handled by dark-side cultists, the same acolytes who operated beneath the Sith Citadel. They performed rituals designed to sever the system from the Force itself, to unbind the light. Witnesses describe these rites as involving black mirrors, living blood, and chanting that made gravity feel wrong. What followed was not destruction, it was absence. A galaxy going quiet. Here's a truth that was buried with the Empire. The galaxy didn't fall all at once. It faded.
Worlds that once sang with culture and joy became eerily mute. Music banned, literature lost, languages restricted. Sometimes entire species were ordered to speak only basic or face execution. Palpatine believed that language itself was a weapon of resistance, and so he dulled it. Over time, fewer stories were told, fewer names remembered. 1,000 years of Republic light choked in the dark folds of his robe. The silence screamed back, but some voices refused to die. In 5 BBY, a rebel signal burst through across 67 sectors for precisely 8.4 seconds. It was intercepted and erased almost immediately, but not before a handful of slicers decrypted a phrase. We still exist. He cannot delete the living. Those slicers vanished within days, not executed, not imprisoned, just disappeared. And those who heard the message, some began reporting vivid hallucinations, children dreaming of voices in ancient tongues, starship pilots claiming their vessels whispered to them, Force-sensitive agents descending into psychosis, muttering about hollow systems and the scream behind the stars. The Jedi once taught that the Force is balance. Palpatine taught it how to forget. The map that shouldn't exist. There is one artifact, perhaps the most cursed in galactic archaeology, known as the Black Map. Recovered from the wreckage of a dead Star Destroyer near Jakku, it's a twisted mass of burned durasteel, etched with coordinates in Sith script. Each location marked on it corresponds to systems that no longer exist on any known chart. Each coordinate, a grave, or worse, a lock. The map is sealed in a deep core vault beneath the restored Senate on Hosnian Prime. But officials report that it hums, not mechanically, psychically. A low vibration, like breath from something that no longer lives. Palpatine didn't just erase the galaxy, he reshaped the silence, made it sharp, heavy, hungry. And if you listen long enough, you'll hear it listening back. They weren't born, they were assembled. That's how one surviving technician described the creatures on Exegol. When Palpatine's body began failing, he didn't seek healing. He sought multiplication. Hidden beneath the storms of Exegol, in black labs humming with forbidden science, the Sith Eternal built not life, but vessels, empty shells designed to contain the Emperor's essence. Most of them failed, grotesquely. Some lived only minutes, others screamed until their lungs collapsed. Technicians wore soundproof helmets, but some still went mad. The screaming didn't just come from mouths, it came from the Force. Glass vats held malformed bodies. One had no eyes but blinked constantly. Another was just a rigged cage and a heartbeat. Several began to rot before they were born. Palpatine's spirit tried to enter them, but his soul was too rotten, too heavy. It crushed them from the inside. He needed something stronger, a body not just of flesh, but of legacy. So he ordered a new creation, a son, engineered from his own corrupted DNA. The result was stable, but not worthy. So Palpatine waited for the granddaughter, a body born of blood but untouched by decay. Meanwhile, the halls of Exegol filled with failed lives, pickled corpses, and twitching horrors sealed behind transparasteel. Even now, they say the storm over Exegol hums not with thunder, but with the echoes of cloned agony.
The galaxy feared his power. But on Exegol, we saw his fear. He was terrified of death, and he created hell, trying to escape it. He didn't need to see you. He already knew you existed, and why. By the end of his reign, Palpatine trusted no one. Not his admirals, not his guards, not even his own blood. But his paranoia went deeper than fear. He wasn't just afraid of traitors. He believed something else was watching him. That's why he built the Eye Network, a web of surveillance relays, not just around people, but around emptiness. Uninhabited moons, silent temples, abandoned Jedi shrines, all fitted with Sith sensors, because he believed ghosts of the Force were whispering in the cracks of space. His throne room on the Death Star had no mirrors. Mirrors, he said, reflect things not of this world. Instead, he surrounded himself with walls that listened, coated in kyber dust and obsidian, materials said to absorb emotion. He placed secret doors everywhere, even within his own chambers. Some led nowhere. Others led to chambers that hadn't been opened in years. One chamber had only a chair and a single dead plant, untouched, preserved like a memory or a warning. Servants reported hearing voices in the walls, whispers that mimicked their thoughts. Acolytes began to lose sleep, claiming the floorboards were watching. Palpatine spied on Force echoes. He recorded silence, archived dreams. And yet, the more he watched, the more terrified he became. Of what? Not rebels, not Jedi, but the idea that somewhere in the galaxy, something unseen was watching him back. The most powerful man in history died not in battle, but in a room full of eyes he built to protect himself. They thought he died, but death was only his cocoon. When Palpatine fell into the reactor shaft aboard the second Death Star, millions celebrated. Fireworks, statues torn down, children named after rebels. But no body was ever recovered, no ashes, no remnants. Because there was nothing left to bury and everything left to fear. On Exegol, deep in the storm-scarred chambers of the Sith Eternal, something stirred. Not a man, quite a ghost, but a fragment, a thought, rage, memory, and will. They didn't clone Palpatine, they rescued him, pulled his consciousness through raw Force ritual, tearing it from death and sealing it in a broken body. A body that could barely breathe, barely speak, but one that hated more perfectly than ever before. The acolytes called it the husk, a twisted shell strung up by black machines, whispering orders through bleeding tubes. When it moved, the lights flickered. When it slept, the wind outside screamed. His eyes were milky white, but they saw everything. His flesh peeled and rotted, but he remembered. He no longer needed a galaxy. He wanted a legacy of fear, wanted to be a myth you couldn't kill. The Emperor is dead, they said, but nightmares don't need a pulse, only belief. And every time someone speaks his name, he twitches somewhere in the dark.